You're listening to Girls with Grafts, a burn community podcast created by Phoenix Society for Burn Survivors, a leading nonprofit dedicated to supporting the burn community. In this podcast, we'll talk with burn survivors, share resources to help with supporting and improving burn recovery, and discuss how to prevent burn injuries. Here are your hosts, burn survivors and Phoenix Society's marketing team, Amber Wilcox and Rachel Kudlak.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Girls with Grafts. I am Rachel Kudlak. I'm one of the hosts of the show. And today, unfortunately, I'm not joined by my lovely co-host, Amber Wilcox, but that's okay. I have an awesome guest lined up for today's episode. So without further ado, let me thank today's sponsor, and then we can get into the show. So today's podcast is powered by the Cunningham Law Firm. Located in Phoenix, Arizona, and helping clients nationwide, the Cunningham Law Firm specializes in personal injury, wrongful death, and burn-related cases. And you can learn more about them by visiting cunninghamlawfirm.com. And as I mentioned, we have an awesome guest on today's episode. Today, we're welcome on Kelly Woodhouse. Kelly is a burn survivor and was injured when she was just 2 on 75% of her body. She found a way to go from near death to success, from the Scarface girl to the TEDx stage, not once, but twice. A documentary about her life story called Still Beautiful launched on TV Plus Goalcast and it has a video that has over 10 million views. Global TV announced that Kelly as one of the most inspirational people of 2020. You have to ask yourself how. How did the Scarface girl find strength in her scars? So thank you so much, Kelly, for joining us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Rachel. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yes. Well, I know a little bit about, your injury and your journey, but for those listening, can you just tell us a little bit more about yourself and your journey as a burn survivor?
Yeah, you bet. So it was back in 1968. So, and I was 2 years old, and my cousins were throwing shingles in the fire from the old barn roof. Our grandpa had asked them to burn the shingles, and so that's what they were doing. They were 9 and 11 at the time. And so my mom, she was 21 years old, barefoot and pregnant. It's crazy time. And anyways, she had made us supper, and then they wanted to go outside to burn the shingles, and my mom had a decision to make. Was she going to let me go outside to play with my cousins, or was she going to keep me inside to change my diaper? Well, she had decided to let me go outside and change my diaper later. So then I think it was like 5 or 10 minutes later, my mom could hear some yelling and screaming, and she opened the window and she saw that I was in flames. And so she ran out of the house, and my cousins, of course, grabbed a bucket of water and they poured the water on me. And my mom grabbed me and wrapped me up in a blanket, and they rushed me to the hospital. And I spent 4 months in the hospital. And every 2 days, I would have to go into the operating room for surgeries. And then every 2 years, until I was about 20 years old, I'd have to go back to the hospital for more surgery. They needed me to grow so that they would have more skin to work with. So, Rachel, I know you're familiar with that because you got burnt at 3. So,
yeah.
I
know all about that. Going back to the hospital for me, it was like every summer vacation, it was back to the hospital. That was my summer trip. So we can definitely relate to each other in that point. But, I've shared on here before my experience growing up as a burn survivor. So I'd love to kind of, for you to tell us a little bit more about that experience, about just growing up, looking different than your peers. And, even that transition for me was from, elementary school to middle school and then to high school and college, just kind of having to do it all over again at each of those like big landmarks or whatever milestones, I guess.
Yeah. So, and like you and I can both relate because we both got burnt as a little one, as a toddler. I think one of the best things was that I don't remember the accident. I don't remember it at all. And I find that fascinating that I don't remember it, because my mom said that when I was in school, I did remember it and I was telling kids about it. But anyways, I think my brain just kind of wanted to protect me. And so that's how it blocked it out. But I do remember all my surgeries for sure. I remember all that. But yeah, going to school, I remember being in grade 5 and I walked past my teacher's desk and someone had drawn a picture. And of course it was of me. And it was a circle. It had nose and mouth on it. And then it had scribbles all over the face. And then it said Scarface on it. And so that was the reality for me, that I realized that the kids were calling me the Scarface girl. I was half deaf, so I didn't hear a lot of what people were saying about me, but that was confirmation to me that they were calling me names. And so, then in grade 6, I remember, what was it in grade 6? Oh, so in grade 6, I remember one of my friends coming up to me, and him and I, like, we were friends right from kindergarten. Like our moms curled together. And so, we were like best buddies. And I'll never forget one time he came up to me with the bully and he said, "Kelly, I don't want to be your friend anymore." I said, "You've been in all my classes and I don't want to be in your class anymore. I don't want to be your friend." And I was like, "What? What's going on? Like, this is Joey. This is like my best friend. Like, why is he doing this?" And I still remember when we had our 10-year high school reunion, and no, our 20th year. And so I called him because I was on the committee, and I said, "Hey, Joe," he said, "So great to hear from you, and we're doing a reunion," and he said, "Oh yeah, like we haven't talked for a while, like since the 10-year." And I said, "No, Joe, we haven't talked since like we were 12 years old." And he's like, "What? What are you talking about?" I said, "Yeah, you came up to me and with the bully and said you didn't want to be my friend anymore." And he's like, "What?" And so anyways, there's those kind of situations. But Rachel, I think one of the difference between me and you is that when I grew up, there was no internet. So I always believed I was the only one. There was no burn support groups. And so I remember saying to my mom, "I think I'm the only one in the world who's burnt," because I didn't know anybody like me. And she's like, "No, no, no." And I said, "Okay, Canada. I'm the only one in Canada that's been burnt." And she's like, "No, no, no." And I said, "Okay, Alberta." No. And I was like, "Okay, fine, Edmonton. I'm the only one burnt in Edmonton." And she goes, "Okay, maybe." And I know she was trying to just get me to shut up. But I really felt that way because there was no burn support group. And it wasn't until I was 18 that I actually met another burn survivor. And then I was like kind of freaked out because he was like a 90% burn. And I was like, "Oh my God, that doesn't look like me. Like, that's what a burn survivor looks like. Oh my gosh." Right. And I was so scared because, I was 2. So I grew up that way. I didn't know my life any different. Right. Whereas as an adult, you have an identity already, and then you get burnt and you have to change your identity. So me, I felt like I didn't feel like there was times when I said to myself, I wonder if I was actually born this way, because there's only 10 pictures of me without scars. Right? So yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally relate to that. And, the differences of an adult being injured versus a child, like you said, we didn't really have an identity before. We can't remember the times that we weren't a burn survivor. So it's so much different. And I also, when you're sharing that story about your friend who came up to you and said, "We can't be friends anymore," isn't it just so crazy how like you can remember that moment and that has been with you ever since it happened, but to that other person, they don't remember it because it wasn't anything, I guess, I shouldn't say important to them, but it wasn't anything crazy. They wanted to say that and they said it that day, but yet those little words just shows how much, your words matter.
Yeah, it's right. And for him, he was just being a dumb 12-year-old, right?
Yep.
Whereas I took it personally because of my scars, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just really took it personally. He didn't. He just thought, well, I'm just being a dumb boy. you
Yep.
know?
No,
He didn't know any different. And he doesn't remember. He's like, there's no way I was friends with that guy. And I'm like, yeah, you were. Or maybe it was just for a day or two. I don't know. But
Yep. Yep. No, I have memories like that too of, friends now, but when your kids say whatever is on their mind at the time. And I remember some mean things that were said to me, and if I called them up and said, hey, do you remember when you said this to me? They would have no recollection.
No recollection.
So it's
I
just,
know. And then a girlfriend, well, she wasn't a girlfriend. She was just a girl in our school. She found me on Facebook, and she said, oh, by the way, was I ever like mean to you? Because if I was, I'm really sorry. Like I was just young, and I'm like, and she never was mean to me, but it was just kind of, interesting how as an adult she wanted to apologize for being mean to me if she was. So
yeah, no, that's really sweet. That's really sweet.
yeah.
But, so, you mentioned, you didn't get to the opportunity to meet another burn survivor until you were 18. How did just growing up, feeling like you were the only one, feeling like you were born this way, how did that influence your self-image? And over time, did that change where now you're a beautiful, confident woman with your scars?
It's really interesting. I did a TEDx talk, and my TEDx talk is called Ugly is Still Beautiful. And ugly is an acronym, and it stands for the unique, gorgeous, lovable you is still beautiful. Now, when I was doing my TEDx talk, when you do a TEDx talk, it has to be new information. It has to be something new, right? Like what is the new thing you want to teach? And so I wanted to evaluate, where do we learn that the mirror talks, right? Because you know how it is, Rachel. You go in the mirror and we look at ourselves, and a lot of times we just pick everything apart. We're like, oh my gosh, I hate my nose. Oh, I hate my ear, right? Because my ear is deformed, right? I hate my mouth. I didn't like the way my lips are. I didn't like the way my nose was. I didn't like the scar on my neck, right? So that was what I was always picking out. When I would look in the mirror, I would see all the ugly things about me. And I would say to myself, I am beautiful, because people say, if you just keep repeating, I am beautiful, eventually you'll believe it. Well, that doesn't work. And I know that because I tried it, right? It just doesn't work. But what does work is when you go in the mirror and you say, hey, I happen to love my big, beautiful green eyes. And when I did that, that negative voice didn't say anything to me, because it's true. I believe it. I love my big, beautiful green eyes. And then I looked at my nose and I was like, oh my gosh, I have a cute little nose. Right. And then I looked at my ear and I was like, oh, I love my ear. Right. Like as an adult, I was able to do that. And I said, I love my ear. Right? Because it makes me special, it makes me different, it makes me unique. And then I looked at, my bum, because I had my favorite jeans on, and I was like, oh my gosh, I love my cute little hot ass, right? And so I was learning to embrace myself. And then the next time I went into the mirror, I saw all the things I loved about myself instead of my ugly scars. My scars just blended in, and I realized that there was beautiful things about me. But again, when I was evaluating for my TEDx talk, where do we learn that the mirror talks? Now, Rachel, do you remember when you watched Snow White for the first time?
Yes, I do.
How old were you?
4,
5, 6?
Yeah, it's young, in that range.
Right. Anywhere from probably 4 to 6 years old, you walked up for the first time and you saw the big giant mirror and the evil queen talking to the mirror, and the mirror talks back in this big voice with a human face in it. And we learned that the mirror talks. And so when we go in the mirror, we hear this voice and we think it's the mirror, but it's not the mirror, it's ourselves, which means we can control our thoughts. But anyways, it was like, oh my gosh, we are teaching these little girls and little boys that the mirror talks when they're 3, 4, 5, 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And
No, go ahead.
no, and so I believe that that's when we learn it, and that's when it's all that self-talk, and that's where we start telling ourselves how ugly we are. And I remember being 16, and I prayed to God, and I said, "Dear God, please don't make me wake up in the morning, but if I have to, can I at least be scarless so I can be pretty like all the other girls?" And of course, when I woke up in the morning, I looked in the mirror, and the scars were still there. And I thought, my doctor hasn't taken my scars away. My God hasn't taken my scars away. So I guess I'm going to be the ugly girl forever. And so, yeah. So anyways,
yeah. And so how did you, or how and when or what kind of started shifting your perspective into like embracing your scars and having, the confidence to get up on the TEDx stage and talk about them? Like, obviously, when you were 16, you probably would have never, if someone told you you'd be doing that one day, you probably wouldn't believe
Oh, exactly. No, I never thought I would ever be a speaker. I mean, like, I just thought I'm the ugly girl. So I think I'm not going to have a good life, right? Because nobody's going to want to marry me. I'm never going to have kids because nobody's going to want to be with a Scarface girl. Like, there's no way. And every time I looked in the mirror, I said, I'm beautiful. No, the mirror says, yuck, you're ugly. Beautiful women do not have scars on them. And so I never believed I would ever get married or any of that. So I did find a man that, and I did end up getting married, and I did end up having kids. And it's actually Cindy Rutter. Cindy.
Yes.
Yeah, she's such a beautiful soul. So Cindy, this is when the Phoenix Society had their burn conference in Canada. And Cindy was there. And I said, Cindy, I don't think I can have kids. And she's like, what? Why? Why don't you think you can have kids? And I'm like, well, with my scars completely cover my chest, my back. I'm missing a nipple, my face, my forehead, I have a bald spot, my arms, my legs. Like, I'm covered in scars. Like, I can't have kids. And she says, well, I have 2 girls. And she goes, and that girl has 2 girls, and that kid. And I'm like, what? And I said, okay. And this was really a real cool moment for me and Cindy. I said, okay, does your daughter look like you? And she's like, yeah, she does. And I said, oh my gosh, so you know what you would look like without scars? And she's like, yeah, I do. And that was so cool for me because it was like, well, maybe I should have if I get pregnant, I'd love to have a baby girl because then maybe I'll know what I look like without scars.
Yeah.
Right? So that was one of my pivotal moments. But one of my other pivotal moments was I was in my 40s. I don't remember how old I was, but I know I was in my 40s. And I already had the kids and all that. And we went to a garage sale, me and my husband. And we go in the garage sale, and this lady says to me, they couldn't do better than that. And I was like, oh, right? I was just like, oh.
Shaking my head at that comment.
I know, right? And she was an older lady, and I was like shaking my head. And I'm like, what do I say? Like, when I was younger, I was the one that would say something mean back. But, I'm older. So I was like, okay, I don't handle it that way anymore. So I looked at her and I said, I happen to think I look pretty damn good. And I turned around and I walked away. I didn't even give her a chance to respond. And I got thinking, and my husband said to me, Kel, she didn't mean it that way. And I said, she meant it how she said it. And what she meant was, how come they couldn't do some sort of surgery on you and make you beautiful? And what she didn't know is that I got burnt as a 2-year-old to 75% of my body. I had 40 surgeries. I've had laser surgery. I've had all this surgery to try and make me beautiful. And this is the best that they could do.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, why am I letting a complete stranger take my power away? Like, I'm never going to see this lady again. I don't even, because I'll deck her if I see her again. No, I won't. But that's how I felt at the
No,
time.
totally.
You get it, Rachel. I know
Yes.
you get it. When somebody says something rude, it's just like, oh, I know I shouldn't, but I really feel like it.
Mm,
Um, anyways, I thought to myself, why am I letting a complete stranger take my power away?
yeah.
Not once have my kids or my family or my friends ever said to me, Kel or Mom, I would love you more if you were scarless.
Mm,
Nobody's ever said that to me. And yet I'm letting a stranger say that I'm not beautiful enough.
yeah.
And so that was when I said, that's it. I'm done. I'm done feeling like the ugly girl. And that's when I did the mirror exercise that I was just telling you about, where I picked out, all the things I loved about me. And when I did that, that's when I realized it doesn't matter what other people think about me.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
No, I love that. I love, that idea of, and obviously it takes time to get to that place, but yeah, why are you giving anyone else the power to
Yeah.
to ruin your day, to ruin how you feel about yourself? Like at the end of the day, that lady's comment is mean and hurtful, and that's it. Like, sure, maybe she didn't think about, you know, how that would make you feel in the moment. She was maybe just saying what first came out of her mouth, but
Yeah.
obviously it was mean, it was hurtful, and yeah, why give her so much power in your life when, let's, like you said, you're never gonna see her again, and if you do, she better watch out. No, but for me, one thing that I kind of can resonate too with that of, I grew up, and sometimes, and I still struggle with this. I think it's always going to be a part of my life is I, my love language is words of affirmation. And I like that validation of positivity, of like
Yeah.
telling me I look beautiful. And I know at the end of the day, I have to feel like that for myself on like inside. But it is funny how like I do, if people are mean, verbal words, whether they're good or bad, really impact me, no matter what the intent is.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, I love the love languages. I think when you know your love language, then you know what you need,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you need to feel beautiful, and you are beautiful, by the way. So,
Oh, thank you. Thank you. No, but it's so true. And growing up, especially, and I know we talked a little bit about even our differences, but even more so in today's world where, it's basically like you're born and then a phone is suddenly in your hands and you're on
oh,
social media and everyone's comparing themselves. And I still fall into this trap sometimes of, and it's not even so much about maybe my burns per se, but just, we're just always comparing ourselves, whether it's
yeah.
looks, careers, parenting, all, like literally anything. You can compare yourself to others, and that can be really, really hard.
I love that you bring that up, Rachel, because that's so true. And it's interesting because one of the three traps of why, women can't or don't love themselves is that
Mm-hmm.
reason. Because we walk in a room and we compare ourselves. We instantly look in the room and we think, oh my gosh, she's prettier than me. Oh my gosh, she's more put together than me, so she must be richer than me. Oh, she must be more wealthy, because she just, she must be stronger than me because she looks stronger than me. And yet everybody has their own thing. And
Yep.
that's one of the things we have to learn to do, is to quit comparing ourselves to people. Like, I never forget this one lady. I was speaking at an event in Calgary, and I'm a big believer in giving out compliments. I believe that it's that one little tiny gift that can make somebody feel so good. And
Yep.
so I went up to this lady. She was like the most well put together lady. Like, she was like dressed to the hilt. She was like walking around the room, like doing things. And I was like, oh my God, like she's the powerhouse in the room. And I was the speaker. So I go up to her and I said, oh my gosh, you are like so gorgeous. And she's like, thank you because I don't feel it. I
Mm.
do not feel it at all. And she was telling me a little bit about what's going on in her life. And I was like, we don't know what people are going through. And they may look like they're better than us, but they're struggling so
Mhm.
much. Right. And so the other thing is too, like when we meet people, we think, oh my God, they're so much better than me, and they're noticing everything that's wrong about me. And I can promise you, they're thinking about you for about 2 seconds, and they're back to thinking about themselves and
Yep.
everything that's wrong in their life. Right.
Mhm.
So that's why I believe we need to quit comparing ourselves to other people, because they may not be better than us. And
Mm.
who cares if they're better than us?
Yep.
Right.
For sure.
So.
For sure. We're all, I always say this too, just with, being a burn survivor, is like, I've had my struggles, but we all have struggles. Maybe sometimes mine are a little bit more visible because you can see them, but that doesn't mean that, the person right next to me isn't having other, confidence issues, or they have to learn to love themselves just as much as I do. So, I'd love to know if you have any, tips, or advice for especially maybe young women who have scars, who maybe are getting bullied by their friends, or, just kind of on that struggle bus to really love themselves.
That's a great question, Rachel. Oh, there's so many things that someone can do. The first thing, of course, is quit comparing yourself to other people.
Mhm.
That's like number one. And I know, even for myself, I find it hard sometimes. Sometimes I still walk into a room and I'm go, oh my gosh, like, why am I here? I shouldn't be here. I'm not good enough. Blah blah blah. But I am, and I'm quiet too. So when I get into a room, I'm really quiet, and so sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad. But that's
Mhm.
the first thing. The second thing is to quit worrying about what everybody's thinking about you,
Mm.
right? Because if all you're doing is thinking about, well, what are they thinking about me? It really doesn't matter, because they're not thinking about you.
Mhm.
They're thinking about themselves and their own life, right? The third thing is exactly what I was telling about with the mirror, right? Like, when you go in the mirror, instead of saying yuck, or instead of picking out what you don't like about yourself, go in the mirror and say, you know what? I love my cute little nose, or I love my personality, or I love whatever it is about you that you love. It's interesting because I just had a photo shoot done a couple weeks ago. And so I finally got the pictures yesterday. And I was like, ooh, really? you know, and it was sad, because the thing is, I do love myself. So why was it that the first thing I did is pick the things I
Mhm.
didn't like? Right? So we have to make a conscious effort. Like, I think what people, or especially women, are expecting is that when you love yourself, it's just an on-off switch, right? Like,
Mm.
today I love myself, I'm going to turn myself on, right? Or like, people don't understand that loving yourself is a daily thing,
Mhm.
right? It's not
Definitely.
something where it's on and it's on forever. There are times when, Rachel, when someone says something to you, when it's like, oh geez, now I don't feel so beautiful, right? Or I don't feel loved. But then you have to do the things that help yourself to feel
Mhm.
loved, right? So one of my tips too, and I love this tip, like when I went through my divorce, every time I saw my husband's name, I would growl at my phone. I would go, "Ugh, I don't. What does he want? I don't want to talk to him." And being that I'm a motivational speaker, I don't like being triggered into anger,
Mm.
because then that doesn't keep me on a positive mindset. So I always have to really work hard at that. So what I did is I changed his name on my phone. So Rachel, what do you think I changed his name to? Take a guess.
Oh, is it something from Snow White? I
Pardon?
don't.
No.
Oh,
So here's I changed his name on my phone.
yeah.
So a lot of people would say, "Oh, you probably changed it to asshole or something like that," right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, "No, because that would trigger anger,
Oh, okay.
right?" So I changed his name to Poor Soul. So then the next time he called me or he texted me and it said Poor Soul, and I was like, "Oh, Poor Soul is calling. What does Poor Soul want?" Right? And so I had empathy instead of anger.
Mm. Yeah.
So if you have somebody in your life that whenever you see their name, or you hear from them,
Mm.
change their name in your phone,
Mm.
and you'll be amazed at how powerful that is. But don't change it to something like asshole or bitch or something negative. Change it to something like poor soul, because that is going to give empathy for them, and that's going to keep you in a positive headspace.
Mm-hmm.
So, and your generation too, Rachel, like we didn't have internet and we didn't have cell phones. So it was easier for us, I believe, because like school, like if we got bullied in school, we could go
Mm.
home and we didn't get bullied, right? Whereas, your generation, like you said, you're born with a cell phone in your hands. So, you guys could be bullied 24 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And so the big thing is learning to turn it off.
Yeah.
Learning to say, you know what, I'm not going to be attached to my phone. Like I even do it with my clients. Like some of my clients, they want access to me whenever they feel like it. And I'll tell them, look, after 8 o'clock at night, I'm not answering your text message. And if it's a weekend, I'm not answering your text message
Mm.
or your phone call unless we're doing a book launch. So if we're doing a book launch, then fine, I'm available to you. But
Yeah.
I set boundaries. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what we have to do as people is like, no, I am not going to let you treat me this way. And if you're going to treat me this way, then you're not going to be in my circle of friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Right?
I
So,
think that the idea too of surrounding yourself with people that lift you up, that empower you, that make you feel beautiful, that you
yeah,
can be comfortable and confident around is so, so important. And and sometimes that does change. Unfortunately, maybe some of the friends, especially for those who are burned as an adult, maybe some of the friends that you had before your injury really weren't the people who you thought they would be afterwards. And obviously that can be really
yeah.
difficult, but I think that idea of empowerment and just feeling confident does come from who you surround yourself with.
Oh, totally.
What you're who you're following on social media. For me personally, I do compare myself to others at times, and then
Yeah.
I started unfollowing some celebrities, because it's like, yeah, of course they're gonna look perfect and appear perfect on social media, but that's truly not the case, even if that's the story they want us to believe.
Yeah, absolutely. You're totally right. I mean, that's one of the other strategies that I would give people is to surround yourself with positive people
Mhm.
who are going to love and support you, not knock you down. So you want people that are going to empower you. It's actually one of the reasons I divorced my husband was because
Mm.
he saw the world as full of doom and gloom, and I saw the world as full of
Mm.
possibilities. And so to me, it was more important to be with people who saw the world as full of possibilities than
Yeah,
the doom and gloom, because that was so hard for me to try and do better, right? Because it just felt like such a big challenge. So
mhm.
you're right. Surround yourself with people who love and adore you and want to, empower you.
Yeah.
So, and that's actually one of the reasons, like when you guys approached me about your podcast, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I'm in, right? Because I love that there's a supportive community for, girls with grafts, because I remember when I was younger, there was nobody, there was no
Mhm.
internet, there was no Facebook group to be a part of.
Yep.
And that's the beautiful thing about, you guys at the Phoenix
Yeah,
Society is how you guys bring people together and say, yeah, there is somebody like you, and there is somebody that wants to help you. And here's all the support systems that we have to help you, move through life.
for
So,
sure. Yeah, I know we've been talking some crap on having a phone when you're, in our generation, that you're born with one, but there's also so many positives to it too. Like you just mentioned, that
oh,
you can get connected to folks.
yes.
We do have a lot of listeners who are in rural communities who, maybe aren't close even to their burn center anymore and don't have that connection to other burn survivors. And, our virtual opportunities allow them to have it. I know there's nothing like being together in person, but at least,
Yeah.
the virtual connections can be, in the meantime until we can be together in person.
Oh, yeah, I know. And that's one of the things that I love about your generation is, the access to all the internet groups and support groups. And I know many times other burn survivors have reached out to me because someone got pregnant and the person, and it's a burn survivor, and they're not sure how to handle it or what's going to happen. And so, they'll tag me and say, I know that Kelly had twins and, with her scars. And so, talk to her about it. And that's the beautiful thing about the internet and social media is being able to connect and collaborate with people and just let people know what's going on. So that's what I love about it.
For sure.
Yeah, it does bring people together for sure. But people have to learn how to turn it off. Right? And I think that's the problem. A lot of people think they have to be glued to their phone 24 hours a day. And you don't. Yep. Nothing is that important.
That is so true. Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to talk a little bit about your documentary, but before we dive into that, I know we have a lot of parents and caregivers who listen to our show as well. So I wanted to see if you had any, advice or tips for them specifically who, maybe they have a young burn survivor that they're caring for, and just anything, maybe any advice you just want to share with, our parents and caregivers who are listening.
Parents and caregivers. You know what? I'm going to share this on behalf of my mom. Okay. Because my mom was 21 and pregnant when I got burnt. And then my sister was born, I think 3 months after I got burnt. My mom had a tremendous guilt over me getting burnt because she felt she should have kept me inside to change my diaper instead of letting me go outside. And she was also mad at my dad because if my dad was a trained boxer, and he was representing Canada in the Pan Am Games. And so my dad was always training. And so my mom blamed my dad also for me getting burnt because she said if he would have been home, I would have been with him. So my advice to parents is please don't take on the guilt of your child getting burnt.
Yep.
As tragic as it is, I honestly believe that I was meant to get burnt. I honestly do. I honestly believe that there was a purpose, there is a reason. And if I didn't go through all of that, I wouldn't be able to do what I do now.
Yep.
And so I believe there's a reason. And I kind of felt bad that my mom had so much guilt.
Yeah.
Anything wrong that happened to me, like even when I went through my divorce, or if anybody was mean to me or rude to me or bullied me, my mom took it on. And to me, that was just the universe's way of building strength in me so that I could be a stronger woman, and so that I could ignore the people that are bullying me, and so I could stand up for myself. Right? When that lady said that to me, they couldn't do better than that. Like, I had to learn to stand up for myself.
Yep.
And so I honestly believe that my parents taught me how to be strong. Right? So
no, I totally agree with that, and obviously I'm not the parent of a burn survivor, but I'm sure regardless of how the situation happened or how they got injured, whether it was a complete accident, whether maybe something could have been avoided, I really just am like, things that are meant to happen will happen. And, I truly believe that, I think there's always a bigger picture meaning behind anything that happens too. And like you said, obviously getting bullied isn't fun, but it made us strong women today. And in the moment, you can't always see the end picture, but I really believe that,
like for me, like I'll never forget this one guy, he asked me to come speak to his Alcoholics Anonymous group, right? He says, you're an overcomer, like you don't quit. So can you come and, talk to our AA group about why people, like how people can quit drinking? And I said, no, I can't. And he goes, well, why? And I said, well, I don't know what it's like to be an alcoholic and have to quit drinking. That would be like me asking you, can you come speak to my group about what it's like to have a skin graft? And he'll be like, well, I don't know what that's like.
Yeah.
I said, exactly. So I said, I can come speak about what it's like to live with an alcoholic stepfather, but I can't come and speak to your group about how to quit drinking, because I don't know what the cravings are. I don't know what that's all about. And so I honestly believe that we are meant to go through all this so we can be stronger, so we can teach others.
Yep.
Right? I mean, Rachel, you probably help, young girls to go through it and say, yeah, this happened to me, but this is how I overcame it. And this is what I did. This is how I handled that. So what better person to teach it than the people who are living through it?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, like I said, I do want to talk about your documentary, Still Beautiful. And for our listeners, we'll make sure we have links to that in our show notes. But, speaking on a water platform and helping others, obviously that was part of it. So what was it like for you just, seeing your story unfold on screen, and what kind of feedback and reception have you had to that?
Oh my God. Okay. So first question, Rachel, I have for you is, do you remember your accident? Because you were 3.
I am the same with you. When I was younger, I would talk about it, and I truly believe at that time I did remember. But over times, I still have some like small memories, but then I also sometimes battle with, oh well, was I told that this happened, so that's why I think I remember it, versus what is an actual memory. So not really. That was a long.
So you're kind of like me.
Really.
Yeah, exactly. So you're kind of like me, where you don't really remember it. So, okay. So the documentary, seeing that was surreal for me, because like you, I didn't have an actual memory of how I got burned. So when they wanted to do the documentary, they actually made people audition to be me. So they had to have a 2-year-old version of me that wasn't burnt, because I got burnt at 2. And then they had to have like a 12-year-old version of me. And then they had to have like an 18-year-old version of me. And then, of course, I'm in it also. So they recreated my accident like to a T, to an absolute T. Like even like the pregnant mom, my neighbor, Uncle Willie, that drove down the driveway and and threw the bucket of water, and then they grabbed me and took me off, and they even recreated like my cousin throwing the shingles in the fire. And so when I saw it, it was very hard. It was like, oh my gosh. And especially seeing the little 2-year-old, like this 2-year-old couldn't have looked more like me. Like it was just crazy. So yeah, it was very, very surreal. It was very emotional for me to see it the first time. And they let me watch it before they actually released it on TV.
Yeah.
So I got to see if I liked it or not. So, and then we decided we would do our own screening. So we rented a movie theater and we invited my friends to come and family and everything. And then we had like a, what do you call it? I don't know what you call those things, like an opening or something. And that was even more surreal for me, because then my friends and family are all coming up to me, and and there's scenes where I'm crying and all this stuff, right? And so that was really hard for me too. I had like another meltdown, because it was like, oh my gosh. Like I don't know how to explain it. But and Cindy Rudder is in my documentary also.
That's
So
awesome.
they actually flew me down to San Francisco, and then we met up with Cindy, and then they had us reconnecting, and they had us go to a winery, and we had some fun moments, and then they interviewed Cindy and talked about her story of how she got burnt, and yeah, so it was just so cool how they did it. It's crazy. It
No,
really is.
that's
Yeah.
awesome. I haven't had a chance to watch it, but I would definitely add that to my list. Because that sounds, I mean, I'm sure it was very triggering for you to kind of see the accident, but I'm sure kind of the ending, you know, seeing you with Sydney, you know, kind of out there living life was
Yeah.
so, motivational, especially to other survivors. What really like inspired you to do the documentary, to, you know, to be a TEDx speaker, you know, why, or yeah, what inspired you to ultimately share, you know, your story on
Right.
such a wider platform?
So I always knew that I had a purpose. I didn't know what it was. I remember I was 18 and I went through a point in my life where it's like, okay, why am I here? Right? Like I got burnt in 1968 at 2 years old to 75% of my body. I should not have lived, but I did. So I knew that there had to be a reason. And so about 15 years ago, I met a lady and her name is Tremaine. And we were at, you know, like a woman's business event. And Tremaine says to me, Kel, you need to be a speaker. And I was like, I'm a burn survivor. So what? Right? Like, because at that point, I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself. And she's like, no, seriously, people will be inspired by your story. You need to be a speaker. You need to sell that business you're in and be a speaker. And I was like, no, doesn't make any sense to me. And at that point in my life, I was in a toxic marriage. I was contemplating divorce. We were almost bankrupt. I I had a business that was, you know, a bankrupt. Well, it was going bankrupt. I also had a full-time job. My husband wasn't working. We had 3 beautiful kids. We had a big mortgage. And so I saw myself as a failure. I didn't see myself as someone who would be inspirational. So I went
Mm.
home that night and I said to my husband, I'm going to be a speaker. And he said, well, how are you going to do that? And who's going to listen to you?
Mm.
Because he saw speakers as, you know, Oprah Winfrey and Anthony Robbins and, you know, these big powerhouse personalities. They are the speakers, not people like me that are covered in scars and almost bankrupt in a toxic marriage, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I don't know, but it's going to happen. And so Charmaine found a way for her and I to get onto a stage together, and they were supporting the firefighters because the event planner, her husband was a firefighter. So they figured, well, I would be a great fit because I had been to burn camp. And they're like, well, why don't we have Kelly come speak and she can talk about burn camp? And we're supporting the firefighters. And the firefighters even came out to the event. And so I'm like, okay. So we did an Ellen show. So Charmaine was Ellen and I was the guest. And it was just so much fun. And so what happened is I noticed that I was telling the story of my baby passing away because I have a daughter, she's 25, and then I had a second baby and I lost her, a baby girl, at 28 weeks. And then I had a set of twin boys. And so I'm telling this story, and all these people are crying, and I'm like, why are people crying? What's going on, right? Like this is what's going on in my head. I'm like, did someone fall and hurt themselves? And that little voice said to me, no, they're crying at your story. It's sad. And then Charmaine asked me another question, and it's about my dad. And my dad had passed away just like a few years before that. And I'm crying, and they're crying, and I'm like, what's going on, right? And then I tell another story and everybody's laughing. I'm like, what's going on here? Why are people laughing? Is there somebody behind me with a big nose on or something? Like, what's going on? Right? Like I had a whole bunch of drama going on in my head. And again, that voice said, no, they're laughing because you're funny. The story
Mm.
is funny. And all these people would come up to me and say, Kel, your story is so amazing. Like, and so I was like, okay, maybe I should do this speaking thing. And so I started and then I became an author. Like my speaking coach said, you need to be an author. And I'm like, I don't know how to write a book. And now I've got like 15 books. And actually this is my book that I just released like yesterday. I just
Oh my
got it. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. It just came out, Scars from Pain to Strength. So um yeah, it was just, I'm the kind of person that people will tell me I can't do something and I will find a way. Like if I want to do it, I'll find a way to do it. That's just who I am. I love accomplishing things. I love making things happen. And then as far as the TEDx goes, I knew I wasn't ready when I first became a speaker. I was like, no, no,
Mm.
no, I'm not ready for this. Like this is a really high pressure speech to do. Like it has to be like to a T. And I was like, oh my God, I can't do this. But anyway, I think it was about six years ago. Yeah, it was right around when my documentary came out. Um, I decided I hired a coach, and he's like, okay, Cal, let's talk about your TEDx talk. And TEDx has to be a theme. So the theme was unprovable or
Mm.
unsolvable problems. And so I wanted to prove that ugly could be a beautiful word. And so that's when I came up with the acronym Ugly is Still Beautiful. And then, of course, Still Beautiful is my documentary. Ugly, it stands for the unique, gorgeous, lovable you is still beautiful. And so that was like the hardest speech I've ever done in my whole 15-year career. But it was also the most impactful one to me because I wanted to prove how do people learn that the mirror talks,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
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 that's
yeah, so I just did it. It wasn't something I needed to do for my career or anything like that. It was just something I want to prove I can do this. And
yeah.
then same with my documentary. It was like people were encouraging me. They were saying, "Cal, like your story needs to be a documentary." And so I pitched my book proposal to a broadcaster here in Canada that's called Accessible Media Incorporated, and they're all about people with disabilities. They believe everybody should have access to TV and radio. So people who are blind, people who are deaf, whatever. And so I approached them. I said, hey, I'm being encouraged to make a documentary about my life story. Here's my book proposal for Still Beautiful. Are you guys interested? And they said, absolutely. And they said, do you want to co-produce it yourself? Because I've done another documentary.
Mm.
Or do you want to produce it with us? And then we'll put money into the pot. And so, of course, I said, yeah, absolutely. If you guys are going to put money in the pot, I'm in. And so then they hired the production team and they wrote the story. And then they interviewed all my friends and family and they created this documentary. So, yeah, it was pretty cool. It was a pretty crazy experience. For 6 weeks, they filmed me and recreated my accident and interviewed a bunch of my people. And then how they ended it is by having me speak to a group of 3,000 teenagers.
Aw,
And yeah, so it was a beautiful experience. Yeah.
that's awesome. Like I said, we'll make sure we have links to the documentary, your TEDx talk, and your books all below, as well as your website. And I know we are coming up on time, and we do have 2 final questions we'll ask you at the end. But before we ask those, kind of what's next for Kelly, and how can our listeners, keep up with you and all the great work you're doing?
That's awesome. What's next? Great question. I'm one of these people that does not like to do a lot of planning. Some people say you have to have 5-year goals, you have to have 10-year goals. And, when I look back at my life, like there's no way I could have predicted
Mm.
having a documentary or the Goalcast video that has 10 million views or, all the speaking stuff that I've done. I really find it hard to plan the future.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I am working on is I'm putting together a writer's retreat in the fall. So, and it's going to be in Mexico. I want it to be all inclusive so that we train people, 9 to noon is going to be trainings and teachings on how to write a book, how to speak. And then the afternoon and evening, you get to go and do whatever you want to do, write your book, plan your speeches, whatever it is that you want to do. So that's one of the things that I have coming up. And then, of course, just doing more speaking. Like now that I've got the new book out, I want to do more speaking about this and just teach people how to be more resilient.
Mm-hmm.
And I've come up with the SCARS method, and there's a whole strategy behind that. And so, yeah, so that's kind of what's next for me.
That's so exciting. And like I said, we'll make sure we have your website linked below. So if folks want to get connected, learn more, they have access to that. So like I said, we do always ask our guests 2 final questions. The first one I know you may have answered a little bit earlier, but I'll ask it anyway. So if you could give just one piece of advice to someone navigating life after a brain injury, what would it be?
There's a couple of things. So first of all, it would be really easy to just say, everything happens for a reason. But I hate when people say that because it's just so overused. But I think there's 2 things I want to say. One is, it's a quote I made, and it says, dreams are meant to be found, not tucked away in dreamland. So if you have a dream to do something, go do it. Don't let your scars hold you back from anything, because we are in a more inclusive world than ever before, and we have the power, right? Like, just do it. Don't be that person that's going to hold yourself back. Like, do it. Even if you have scars. Like, I did a model search competition and I won the People's Choice Award. And, I'll never do it again. But because I don't like doing that sort of thing. It didn't make me feel the way I wanted to feel. But I wanted to push myself, and I wanted to be able to say, hey, I can do this. And it doesn't matter if I have scars, right? And the second thing that I want to say is that we are all lovable, whether with or without our scars. People ask me, would you do it all over? Like, if you had to go back in time and you could, do this again. If you were to ask me that as a teenager, I would have said, no, I do not want to go through this again. I don't like being the ugly Scarface girl. But if you ask me as an adult, I would go back and do it again, because all of these lessons that I learned have helped me to be the person I am, and have helped me to be able to teach other people how to get through it. And so I believe that, yes, everything happens for a reason. And you know what it's like, Rachel. There's some burn survivors out there that are like, oh my gosh, my life is over. And then there's other burn survivors that are like, yeah, this happened to me. So what? Let's move forward. So I prefer to see that the world is full of possibilities, and you have a choice. You can see it as full of doom and gloom, or you can see it as full of possibilities. And I choose to see it as full of possibilities.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love the lovable advice. It's so true. And we're all on a journey. It never ends. So that's really, really great advice.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I believe people have to connect with, the Phoenix Society, is because you guys have a huge network of people that want to love and support each other. So tap into that network, because that's what it's there for. It's there to help burn survivors. So,
for sure. Well, it is time for our final question, which is our Phoenix Partner question today, sponsored by the Cunningham Law Firm. So their question is, what is one thing you hope listeners take away from your story today?
Oh, what another great question. Rachel, you asked the best question.
Oh, thank you.
What is one thing I want people to take away from this?
Yes.
Oh, boy. Oh, that's a great question, because I feel like I've already said it. The one thing I want people to take away is, get connected. Like, that's why the internet is here. Yeah, some people are using it for bad stuff, but most people are using it for good stuff, and that's what we can use it for. So tap into the Phoenix Society, tap into some of the burn support groups that are on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever, and just believe in yourself. And I think that was a big thing for me, is that I had to learn to believe in myself, that I do deserve to, have a life. I do deserve to have kids. I do deserve to be loved. And, Now I'm with a guy from high school. So that's kind of cool because I never had any boyfriends in high school. And we've been together, ever since. And here's a cute little story, Rachel. You might like this one. I asked my boyfriend, hey, what's your middle name? And he said, Michael. And my jaw dropped. My cousins' names that were with me when I got burnt is Rodney and Michael. And that's his name, Rodney Michael.
Oh my gosh.
And it was like, oh my gosh, okay, I get it, universe. He's the one.
Yeah, that's the universe telling you found someone special.
Yeah, exactly. So never give up because, you're meant to help other people. So
definitely. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I loved talking with you, chatting with you. It's always fun for me when it's just like I'm just talking to a friend on the podcast.
I know.
I so appreciate you sharing your story with us. Thanks again.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. And thank you, Rachel. Like I said, as soon as I saw your email, I was like, oh my God, I am so in. This is going to be so awesome. I'm so glad that you guys are doing this because every single person needs to subscribe to your guys' channel so that, you get the updates. And so you hear all the great stories that you're sharing with people. So thank you for that. It's awesome.
Definitely. Well, thank you again and have a good rest of your day.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Girls with Grafts. If you are enjoying this content, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.